Hello there, hope you're having a lovely Monday so far. Welcome to this week's episode of Church on Monday. For this week, I want to recap just what I got out of church yesterday and what I'm carrying with me into this week as a creative. The sermon yesterday was by one of our deacons, Deacon Taracha, and he spoke about the practicality of faith. It was an amazing sermon. You can find it on our YouTube channel. I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways, especially as a creative, that I'm taking with me is, am I living a creative life that is limited by what I believe I am able to do? Now, if you think about faith and what faith is the evidence of the unseen. It has very little to do with what we are capable of and everything to do with what God is capable of. But if you think about how the creative industry tends to work and how we tend to function as creatives, we tend to limit our work to what we believe we are capable of doing and capable of achieving. So, case in point, if I feel like as a writer I am good at a particular genre, and so I say, okay, I think I'm good at writing short stories, so that's what I'm gonna do. That's a very logical and a very sound way of looking at things to some degree. But the thing about faith is that it calls us outside of what we believe is possible and outside of what we believe is we are capable of, outside of our strengths. And it's an invitation to venture into places of weakness and allow God's strength to superintend over our weakness. And it's a very interesting dynamic to be in, especially as a creative, because we tend to like the places where we are comfortable and we are confident in, but faith doesn't really allow for that. It calls us to more. It calls us beyond those spaces of comfort and confidence and asks us to take a risk and to trust that in taking a risk, and not just a careless risk, I have to say, it's a risk based on what God has said about you as a creative, a risk that is confined within the limitations of God's purpose for you. And so you take a risk and you're trusting that God is on the other end and He's going to catch you. And taking the risk doesn't mean that things will be linear and that success will be instant. Not necessarily. Taking a risk sometimes has a lot of ups and downs. Just because God called you to it doesn't mean it's going to be easy or trouble-free. I think sometimes we tend to think that because you're facing certain challenges, then either God didn't say it or God wasn't serious about it, but neither is the case. And so looking at this week and myself as a creator, I'm at the cusp of a couple of new launches, both for myself as an author, but also for my business. And all of those are risks, really. And they are risks based on things that God has told me to do. And I'm looking at that and going back to God and saying, before I present these things to the world, I want to present them back to you and say, here I am. I did this thing based on what you told me to. I did my level best to follow through on the instructions that you gave me. Have your way with it. Let any result that comes out of these things be for your glory. Let it not be for me to thump my chest and say, yeah, look at what I can do. Look at how awesome I am. No, let it be, yes, I am awesome because God made me awesome. But let it also be clear that there's only so much that I would have been able to do as Mary, but it is because it is not just Mary at work, but God in Mary at work, that I am able to do exceedingly and abundantly more than what I would have been able to pull off just by myself. And so I think this week, that's what I'm taking with me as I do the last touches on the launches that I'll be doing in the course of what's left of this month. It's going back to God and saying, have your way. I am willing to take the risk. I am willing to put my faith in you. I am willing to put my bets on you. You know, it's all or nothing. This is it. There is no backup plan. You're it for me. So I invite you to think about the same. You can catch the sermon, as I mentioned, over on the YouTube channel for Infinite Fellowship Ministries. But I don't know what practical faith looks like for you, because faith can be a very ethereal concept. We can make it very lofty and high sounding, but I have always believed that for faith to truly work, it really does have to be practical in life. In the everyday, I have to be able to tangibly get hold of faith in my everyday. Otherwise, I'm missing out on something. So I invite you to think about it, especially on a creative front. Have you limited what you're doing, your creative expression, to what you are able to do? Because then that means there's no room for God in your creative life. I mean, if you've got it covered, then what is He coming in to do? Or have you made space? Are there those areas in your creative life where if God doesn't show up, that's it. It's kaput, where it's literally do or die. He has to show up, and you've made it such that He really does have to show up. Do you have the kind of faith that would compel God to stop and marvel? Because that's one of the things that Deacon mentioned yesterday. Where there are instances in the Bible where we found Jesus would marvel at the faith of men. Can you imagine that? Having the kind of faith that would shock Jesus, the Son of God. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm gunning for that. I want to have the kind of faith that causes angels to stop and stare and be like, who is this woman? We've been around for a while, but this we haven't seen much of. This is something about this one. I want to have the kind of faith that causes God to stop. Yes, He was on His way to other things, but He just has to stop and attend to whatever I'm doing in that moment, because it's done in a place of faith and in a place of absolute trust in who He is. And with that, I want to wish you a lovely week ahead. And yeah, think about it. Practicality of faith. Do you have faith? Is it practical? If it's not been practical, what are some of the things that you can start to do to make room for God in your creative life? Have a good week.